Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. How are you all? Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. I just wanted to say, I'll just share this quickly. I just want to say last week's talk was probably the most profound talk I've been to in a very long time. And I'll tell you why. How many of you become vegetarian? Okay, how many of you reduced your meat consumption? Now, my dad, one person, mashallah. So my dad said something that I thought was interesting in the talk just now. He said when you go to speak to a non-Muslim, what happens? They try and run away, right? They don't want to hear it. Now, this is my own, I was sitting in that talk, and I remember Omar came to my house before, and we were talking. He goes, "Watch this show called Cowspiracy." And I remember thinking, I'm not going to watch it, because if I do, I'm going to have to deal with this situation where I'm going to have to face the facts. And I don't want to face the facts because I like meat. So I'd rather not listen to it. Mashallah, you're going to take the pot over there because it's kind of, you've blocked my view now. I think you forget sometimes what's going on. So it's, you'd rather not hear the information because you're not afraid of the information, you're afraid of the consequences. Is that fair? So I thought to myself, how can I, as a person listening, I'm doing the exact same thing that I see my non-Muslim friends. Because what they're afraid is not afraid of Islam. They're afraid that when you recognize the truth, it's the then what? What do I do next? And this is the really important thing. I feel that most Muslims, unfortunately, have made Islam look like a bad thing. Something that's unpleasant. So people don't want to become Muslim because when they see Muslims, it's like, I don't want to do the thing they're doing. Whereas if you can make Islam a beautiful thing, they don't have that barrier. So when they see information, they see truth, they will want to follow the purpose. And I thought that was, when I was listening to it, I thought it was actually a personal reflection for me that I thought I'd share. But it comes, I think, in essence of this topic, right? So there's a question that says, how do we know the Quran is from Allah? The real question is here, if you know it's from Allah, what are you going to do about it? And actually, before you even have a discussion, there almost needs to be a willingness to accept that you are willing to put something on the table and have a discussion and change your mind and go whichever way you need to. I'll give you an example, right? And this is why I mentioned this for teenagers, right? If for some reason, the last talk I gave about can you have a boyfriend, right? Or a girlfriend, a lot of teenagers came. And a lot of people listening, right? If they found out it was halal, what are they going to do? They're going to walk out, alhamdulillah, I'm going to date this girl, I'm going to date this girl, I'm going to do... Because you want to do it. So you're waiting to there's a desire there, and you want the information to back it up. Now, when you find out something's not allowed, or something you have to do that you don't want to do, the information isn't relevant here. What is it that's relevant, Yusuf? Not the information, it's exactly whether you will actually bother doing it or not if you're told the truth. And I think that's the most important thing to mention here before anything, because at the end of the day we can prove to you anything, but if it's just numbers, if it's just 1 + 1 = 2, it doesn't mean anything to you. But if I say I gave you £1 and I've given you £2, now you've got £2 that you owe me, there's a meaning there, there's an action. Does that make sense? Okay, so how do we know the Quran is from Allah Azza wa Jal? I think I brought this because it is a question that we got asked by a lot of our young people. Perhaps something that we take for granted because we just read the Quran so often. We don't really ever stop and think about kind of who is the author. So preliminaries again. We believe in Allah Azza wa Jal. So ultimately, as Muslims, we're not coming at it. We, as everyone in this room, we're coming at this from a perspective that we're trying to learn more about Allah Azza wa Jal. We're not trying to disprove God and these things. That's a discussion another day. But as Muslims, we know and we have enough conviction of this. And we know that God only wants us to do good. And of course, what we do is we ask why, we don't refute. So we're not asking, we're not trying to prove the Quran is not from Allah. What we're trying to do is to understand. And to begin, I just want to consider this ayah of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So Allah Azza wa Jal asked him, or rather he asked Allah Azza wa Jal, "My Lord, show me how you give life to the dead." Allah responded, "Do you not believe?" Abraham replied, "Yes, I do, but just so my heart can be reassured." So then Allah told him, "Then bring four birds, train them to come to you, then cut them into pieces and scatter them on different hilltops. Then call them back, they will come to you in haste, and so you will know that Allah is Almighty, All-Wise." What's the lesson from this? I'll open it to the audience. Suleiman.
You just have to believe, but it's ultimately the reassurance of that which makes you believe.
Good. So you have the belief, but what you're trying to do is reassurance is perhaps I don't like that word because it gives the impression that there's doubt. But what it's trying to do is confirm what's in your heart. But yes, very good. Any other comments? It increases your faith. What does? What increases your faith? Seeing the evidence. So seeing the evidence increases. It's an interesting word. Increases your faith. So was your faith low and now it's gone high, or is your faith always the same, or what is it?
No, when you love something, you should see that your trust increases, your faith increases. That he knows, he was knowing that it's all Allah who's doing that. But when he saw it with his own eyes,
So it's good. Yeah, very good. I understood that. But what I thought was interesting was your phrase. It increases your faith. So is your faith lower and now it's gone higher? That's the question I'm asking. So this is I don't want to get too into this, but it's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Well, one thing is that yes, for normal Muslims, faith does increase and decrease. So that is true. But because of the hadith that for the angels it's constant, for the prophets it's always increased, and for the normal Muslims it goes up and down, the faith. But also it's the annual yaqeen and haqqul yaqeen, and that's so you know something but you have heard about it, but then you see it, then that knowing is reaffirmed, and then you go and experience that thing, then it is even more affirmed. So it's just a different level of knowing.
Okay. So essentially a similar sort of comment, but the summary is you can have faith going up and down. Yeah.
The thing I heard from Sheikh Sha'rawi, rahimahullah, Egyptian scholar, top scholar, he said it's not whether you bring dead to life, how you bring them to life. And you need to read from the other part of the Quran, إِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا إِنَّمَا أَمْرُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَنْ يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ. So Allah, when He wants something to be, He will say be, and it is. So to show Ibrahim how that works, He said to him, I will make you able to do it. Cut these birds into 4 pieces and throw them in, put them in the mountains, and you say to them be. So Allah made even Ibrahim able to say to something be, and it is.
Yeah, it's very profound, that point.
Yeah,
Mashallah.
and then he became, they came to him running. So just the word, Allah doesn't need to go and collect all these particles and oxygen and carbon, magnesium, whatever, stick them together and make the person again. ما خلقكم ولا بعثكم إلا كنفس واحدة.
MashaAllah.
New creation, and to recreate you is like creating one person. Be, and it is. Yeah.
MashaAllah. Did everyone get that? I just want to quickly summarize. So what he wanted to see is how Allah Azza wa Jal creates. And Allah creates by saying be, and it is, right? So what He did is He gave Ibrahim the ability to say come, and they came. I.e. they came back to life. And I thought that was a really profound point. I'm going to pause because I know half my time got eaten and I've not even got into the talk yet. So the two things I wanted to mention here is, one is to pick up on the point of increasing and decreasing, and I think that is a lengthy discussion that scholars make, but essentially there's two things here and we're talking about two different things. It depends what you mean by faith. Now what you actually mean is the feeling of faith, but none of you have in any way decreased in how much you believe there is one God and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his messenger, right? So the same as what we're doing here. Your faith in Allah, you still believe in Allah. We're not saying Allah is 2, 3, 4, astaghfirullah al-azim, right? What we're saying is there's only one God, but that feeling of faith will be reassured. But the second bit is what none of you have picked up, is that Allah has, because I didn't highlight it, Allah doesn't just give him the ability. What does he have to do? He has to go and train birds. How long does it take you to train a bird to come to you? MashaAllah. Go to dua if you want a bird, right? So in a couple of days you'll get it coming flying to you, right? It takes ages. It takes years and years of training and these things. So, and then after all that, kill the bird, right? That bird's worth money. You've trained it, it's coming and flying to you. So all these things, there's that effort. So what we're doing here is, if you want to see and you want to understand these things, there's effort required, and it doesn't happen in a day and a night. It will take years of pursuit of learning, and then Allah will open up the door for you. So there's three considerations. So how do we know the Quran is from Allah? Now I changed the order of these several times, but basically there's three things you can do. There's one which is the challenge, which I didn't have time to put the ayah in, but Allah challenges you to challenge the Quran, to pick up the Quran and to find out. And that's the same essence of the discussion of Ibrahim, and that's what the main focus is going to be on today. The second is the content of the Quran itself. So you read the Quran and you realize there's things in there that's truly amazing, right? And the third thing is the context of the Quran in which it was revealed. Okay, so this is when you're going to need your pieces of paper or your mobiles. MashaAllah, some people have already made strenuous notes. MashaAllah. But what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at the challenge. Now, this is something I think is often overlooked. And this is something I think only one person's done it, so it's okay. But alhamdulillah, even we'll see if you can replicate what you came up with before. But essentially, one of the things about the Quran is the way in which it was compiled and the way in which it was brought together is nothing short of a miracle. And we're going to go through some of them. But to do this, we're going to do a little task. Okay? So those online, you can do it as well. You can follow along. Those who are kind of here, I'm going to read to you some stuff, and I need you to write down what you hear. Simple enough? So you're going to be the scribe. Now, why are we doing this? The Prophet ﷺ, when he would receive revelation, he would call upon some scribes who would write it down, and then that information would then formulate the Quran alongside the memory that they had of the thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to do the same thing. I'm going to read you a sentence. You've got to write it down either on a piece of paper or on your phone, and we're going to see how accurately you note it down. Is that okay? Alright, so everyone ready? Got your pen, paper, mobiles ready? SubhanAllah. If you're in my Sunday school class, I'd be like, I've gave you 5 minutes notice to have a pen and paper ready. No, I'm joking. Yes? I know you have. That's what I thought. I said there's one person, but I'm going to compare how you get your answer before. Okay, so everyone ready? So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everyone, write X.
Do we have to write everyone write it?
You have to do what I told you to do, which is to write the stuff I read out. Underneath it, can you write Y? Okay, and then underneath that, can you write the reason I love you? You got that?
No.
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everyone, write X. Underneath it, write Y. Underneath that, write the reason I love you. You got it?
No.
You got to write it as you want, Rowan. Okay. So in between these in an Irish accent, can you write down I love you? Okay.
No.
How many of you have got everything exactly as they think it is?
Can you say the Irish one again?
So in an Irish accent, in between the X and the Y, you got to write in an Irish accent, I love you. Okay? So how's everyone's looking? How's everyone's answer looking? Perfect answer? 100%? You've all dictated that 100%? Okay. Can you show it to the person next to you? Just make sure you've got the same thing as what they've got. How many of you got the same thing? Written exactly what I gave you fairly clear instructions, right? How many of you got exactly the same as the person next to you? Show it to you. Social distancing and all, but some people have given up, mashallah. They're not Oh, wait. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Everyone get your papers back. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, in between the I love you, you need to add another sentence, please. And you need to say, loads. Okay, and then underneath that, you need to write, and loads, please. Okay?
So, what do we do?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In between the sentence, I love you, you need to write loads and loads, please.
Do you have to write the end?
You have to write what you hear, Rowan. Okay. Right. So, mister, I've done it before. Come bring your piece of paper. I deliberately knew there's going to be one in here that is done it. Have you got it exactly as I've done it? Uh-huh. Let's have a look. So this is the authentic scribe, right? So we've got...
Say X.
What did everyone else write at the beginning?
I wrote everyone write X underneath.
You wrote write X. Okay? So, come back to you in a second. So...
Can I sit down?
Yes, you can. So, everyone very confused? Now, what am I doing? I'm creating an example to you of what we call human error. Okay? Firstly, how many of you left the space between the two sentences and managed to squeeze in the several bits? One or two people. Ayan did, okay? Because Ayan knew it was coming. Now, what's interesting about Ayan, I'm just going to mention that first. He wrote, I changed some of it from the Sunday school. And he wrote exactly what I gave him in Sunday school, not what I wrote here. Now, what does that tell you as well? As an example, there's going to always be people who are like, I've heard this before, or they're going to write what they think you say. Don't they? Now, what did I put? This is how I wrote it. Now, I missed some of it out because of time, but some of these are references and stuff. But it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman, everyone write X. How many people put the comma?
Oh, yeah.
One person, two. The punctuation of the kids. Now, how many of you wrote in the Irish accent, wrote it like this with speech marks? Or how did you indicate the Irish accent? Did you do that? How did you do it, by the way? How did you mention Irish accent? So if you pass your piece of paper on and someone reads it, are they going to know to read it in an Irish accent? They are? How did you do it? So you wrote down in an Irish accent. So maybe now, the next person who picks it up, he's going to pick it up and say, in an Irish accent, say, I love you, aren't they? Right? Okay. Now, the loads that I put down, how did people do that bit? Dua.
L-O-O-O-O.
Did you write loads of O's? Yeah. Okay, so I got Mr. Smarty Pants over there at the back. He just put a little squiggle because he knows I've done it. But this little squiggle of the O to tell you you've got to stretch it, right? Okay, so you've got and loads, right? So you've got this bit here. Now, this bit is actually from a different section. I'm planning to do it in a few years' time. But it's connected to this. And it's the reason I love you. But it comes way later. But it's going to be connected. But I want you to save this because in 5 years' time, you need to bring it back and you need to add a little section. Does that make sense? Now, what is this? You're probably thinking this is just silly, right? Because it makes no sense. But all of this shows you some incredible insights into the Quran and the perfection in which the Quran was written, right? So, the first is the sequence of the Quran. The Quran was revealed over 23 years. Imagine next week I come back to you and I give you one more sentence. Firstly, how many of you would still have your piece of paper? If it's judging by the youth group that I have, by the end of the session they've already lost it. You just find a piece of paper here or a piece of paper there. Imagine having an absence of paper. They would write on sheepskin, they would write on leather, on bone. You have to gather those up. You've lost it. Now, not only that, you've got to remember the order. How many of you wrote any sort of numbers or things? You have to kind of wedge things in, right? How many of you put things where they were meant to be? Literal phrases. How many of you wrote everyone say X or write X? Yeah? Got 2 people. Did you do this with me before?
No, I wrote every single instruction.
Every single instruction. Allah Azza says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. He says, say Allah is one. Now, when a person is there, when I did it in Sunday school, I wrote say instead of write. And all the class just said X. I was like, okay. Everyone started saying X. Every time I say it, say X. But Allah Azza wa Jal said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. The Prophet ﷺ conveyed it exactly, the companions wrote it exactly, and no one has ever since dropped that word. Even though it's not, you wouldn't assume it to be part of the script. The literal spelling of things. So there's X, I literally wrote X. But the Y, did you write it as a letter Y? Did you write it as the word Y? Allah Azza wa Jal says, Alif Lam Mim, and He also says, Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. Why is that one? People have remembered it's not Alam. They say Alif Lam Mim. And then this one, we say Alam Nashrah Laka Sadrak. Because the preservation of the Quran and the perfection of the Quran shows that someone else is doing this, is maintaining this. There's different spellings in different parts of the Quran. How many of you spell I love you the way I did? L-U-V. Apart from the one guy at the back. Right? So, Allah Azza wa Jal in one part of the Quran writes ayyuha with an alif at the end, right? But in Surah Al-Rahman, He says, Sanafrugh lakum ayyuha thaqalan. There's no alif. Now, the Prophet ﷺ didn't read or write, because Allah wanted to prove it was not from the Prophet ﷺ. The companions, when they're orally hearing this, could have easily changed this, or someone later would have thought this is a mistake, someone just miswrote it, and they would correct it. But no one did, and no one has, and it's been 1500 years. Now what's even more amazing is how many hypocrites were there? How many enemies of Islam were there? Somebody could have pretended and come along and said, oh, let's just correct it, I'm a Muslim, I remember hearing this. But no one did or managed, and yet it's still there, perfect as it was. Similarly, وَمَلَئِهِمْ is spelt with an extra ya in this places, but it's not written in that same place in different surahs. You have different spellings of the same word, which I think is astonishing, right? Similarly, the Quran has unique spellings. So Ar-Rahman is not written with an alif. If you were to write it in the Arabic language ordinarily, it would always, you'd write the alif. So much so that we actually call this kind of a kari zabar. Okay. So and I call it a mini alif in my Sunday school class. So it's like a mini alif. It's like an alif, but it's just not written. But you still pronounce it as an alif. Similarly, I mentioned about the separate papers and the gathering up of it. Now, this I thought was interesting. The Irish accent. Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran has preserved different accent pronunciations. And people still recite it the same way. No one in Surah Yunus reads Bismillahi majaraha wa mursaha. How do you read it? Bismillahi majareha wa mursaha. And it's still pronounced with the accent of a different dialect. So Surah Al-Duha. What's interesting is different accents have also been preserved. How do you read Al-Duha? وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. You can also read it وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى. And that's still preserved 1500 years later. Different accents in which the Quran was revealed. Now what's interesting is no one came up and said, you're reading it wrong. They all recognize that they're all true. The interconnection, how the Quran comes 15 years later, this verse comes in at the right place and it's perfect, right? The style of speech in which it was done, yeah. So there's the mad, the long loads. People still pronounce that. It's not been lost. The symbolism of the Quran, so the different kind of things that are contained within it. I'm going to rush through this, I've already run out of time. The Basmallah. So how many times did you write the Basmallah? Who wrote it twice? When I was telling you it. Who wrote it once? Who didn't write it? Who assumed it was part of the thing? How many? But look at this. Whenever you read Quran, do you ever not say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? Is it always written? So what's preserved? Allah's even preserved the manner in which you read the Quran. So you know to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim even if you're in the middle of the surah, even if it's not written. Right? It's beautiful, kind of miraculous element. Surah names and numbers, I won't go through these in detail, but the punctuation I thought is interesting, and the verse numbers. There's no punctuation in the Quran. There wasn't even dots and fathas in the original script, but all of it is preserved, even with the dots, right? Even with where to stop and how to stop and so on. And similarly with this, and finally the orthography as well, which I'll go into another time. So all of that from a simple exercise shows you how difficult it is to simply get 30 people to write the same version of a script of something that was relatively simple in a language you all understood, and all of us read and write. Okay? So how then has the Quran been preserved in such a manner? So then you ask, how do we know the Quran is from Allah? Well, we know that the way it's been compiled and preserved is completely unique. The context in which it was preserved, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the compilation of which it took, the 23 years, but then the fact that it still continues to be recited, and that whole backstory behind the book you're reading, shows that this can't be something that was completely out of the blue. It can't be something that is anything other than divine. Right? And any manuscript now, people will find a manuscript of a different book, they'll realize there's always changes, there's always differences between one and another. So the context, I don't have time to go through these in detail, so I'm kind of rushing through a lot of this stuff. But the civilizations in which it brought out, the knowledge in which led to, all of these things demonstrate this book is not from any other book, or not like any other book. And similarly the content, the countless amount of elements, and this is something I genuinely find kind of incredible. We tend to nowadays focus on the thing which appeals to us most, which is science and these sorts of things. But remember, the Quran could have easily been, and there were many people who tried to, if they could, fault Islam, but they could never get any chink in the armor of the Quran. And that's because of the consistency of its laws, the language in which it uses, the prophecies in which it contains, its timeless nature. There is way too, I have to do another talk on this alone. But I guess the summary of the talk, and apologies for going over, if I want to show you how to prove the Quran is from Allah Azza wa Jal, then just follow the Quran itself. Try and produce even one surah, the like of it. So I tried to produce something. Astaghfirullah. Of course, this was in the light of Ibrahim alayhi salam, trying to understand that. But if none of you could copy down something so simple, let alone coherent, right? Imagine how complex and how beautiful this book was, and how it's been. And I think that's one of many arguments to understand why the Quran is from Allah Azza wa Jal. But I guess it's an interesting, because it's a practical, and it's something you can all get your hands and touch and feel. The homework for the kids was to do this at home. Have you done it? You have. Did you get anything similar? No. So it's going to be interesting, because I've asked them all to bring their parents' notes. It's going to be interesting to see what people brought. But inshallah, that kind of concludes the talk. But it's there's many ways you could go about answering this question. But how do you know the Quran is from Allah? I feel whenever you have a young person in front of you, it's always useful to get them to do what the Quran commands. Well, not commands, it challenges people to produce something like it. And you'll realize very quickly how difficult such a thing is, let alone the context and the content that it contains as well, inshallah. Any questions? Someone's very sorry. Okay. Clearly I've convinced you all.
It's a very interesting topic. You'll have to present this as a main topic all the time.
I've been going to Warwick University. They've asked to do something similar.
Yeah,
inshallah. So I'll mention. This is their prelude. If anyone's watching from that university, they'll know the answers already. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله